Hey, hello everyone. Hello, thank you for coming. Welcome to Zibby's Bookshop. Thanks so much for making your way over here after I'm sure a busy day of work. We are very excited here today to have Lara Hardin, who is a literary agent, author, prison reform advocate, and president of True Literary. Her memoir, The Many Lives of Mama Love, is a 2024 Oprah Book Club pick and a New York Times bestselling author, and also our bookseller Carrie's #1 reco for anyone that walks into this store.
Nice.
She has an MFA in creative writing, and apart from her own book, is also a 5-time New York Times bestselling collaborative writer, including the #1 New York Times bestselling Designing Your Life and 2018 Oprah Book Club pick The Sun Does Shine, which she co-authored with Anthony Ray Hinton about his 30 years as an innocent man on Alabama's death row. In conversation with her tonight, we have Lara Cathcart Robbins,
yes,
who is the best-selling author of the Simon & Schuster memoir Stash, My Life in Hiding, and host of the popular podcast The Only One in the Room. She has been active for many years as a speaker and school trustee and is credited for creating the Buckley School's nationally recognized Committee of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Thank you.
So both very impressive people here tonight. We're very excited to hear a conversation. It'll be about a 30-minute combo between the two of them. We'll open it up to a Q&A, and then we have plenty of books to buy and sign. So enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a very impressive bio you have.
Yeah, it was only half of it too. It's much longer. I need that abbreviated bio for introductions. I just spent a little bit of time with you, and I feel like I asked you all the questions I wanted to ask you here. But first of all, it's so good to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. And you all know, like, have you ever befriended somebody on social media? Has it anybody raise your hand? No? Yes.
Today.
And you have like a relationship, what they call it, parasocial, right?
Yeah.
Relationships. And then when you meet them in real life, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And Lara and I have been friends on social media, and it works in real life, which is really nice.
And I think I just told you were going to be my new best friend too.
You did. Yeah, you did.
Which is one way to just hack that.
Yes. Yeah. So I wanted to, we had a conversation a couple months ago, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. But there were some of the questions I asked you I wanted to repeat. So I don't know how many of you have actually read the book yet, but it's an amazing book. There are so many beats that are the same in our two books. Mm-hmm. So I was reading it feeling like I was reading about myself. And I know that that's not unique. I know that other people have read it and found themselves in your book as well. I wanted to see if you would, first of all, do you want to tell us what the book is about? Do you want to do that? Or should we go into my questions? Do you all know the book? Or no? Okay, so then, why don't you summarize what the book is about?
I'm trying to think what's on the jacket copy.
You want me to read that? No. I can read that.
First of all, can I just say, today is my book's 1-year birthday, because
it's the book's birthday.
Came out August 1st of last year, which is a year ago, and then came out when Oprah picked it at the end of February. But I was just thinking when we were coming here, like I was so nervous a year ago, like I'm going to do a book event, and now I'm like, what's my book about? No.
Right.
I should have been more nervous.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happy book birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you want to read your jacket, or do you want to summarize?
No, I'll summarize. I actually know what it's about because it's a memoir. Do you want a chair? You're good. Okay. So it is a memoir of my going from soccer mom, PTA mom, Little League mom, basketball mom. It was really more basketball than soccer, but everyone knows what soccer mom means. To becoming an opiate addict, to basically in the course of 11 months, and the book starts at the end of the 11 months, really, completely imploding my life and getting arrested and in my cul-de-sac and pleading guilty to 32 felonies and basically going to jail for a year and losing everything that made up my identity and who I was, and having to rebuild after that and figure out who I was. And it's about writing and storytelling, my love of books. You know, the first sentence is reading was my first addiction. And that's, I think that's relatable to people, especially in bookstores. But discovering writing again and the ways it can both help you make sense of your own story, and really it's about overcoming shame and owning your story in the end. But the jacket's tighter.
The jacket's tighter, but it's more sensational, right?
Yeah.
The jacket's more, as it should be. But I was just going to read this little piece of As Needed for Pain, which is the title of the first chapter. It says, I'll just start here, but you can't outrun yourself. And eventually books and writing didn't give me the escape I still craved. I turned to sex and food and money when I had it, and more sex when I didn't. And then it was opiates, Vicodin for a long, semi-manageable time, and then heroin. I was addicted to all those things and none of those things. Escape was my real addiction. The one true high. Books were just my gateway drug. Sex got me pregnant. Food made me puffy. Vicodin helped me pretend I was happy. The heroin, though, gave me everything I had ever wanted. Peace, joy, and escape. Until it didn't. And everything I knew and everyone I loved was gone. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more, because you just mentioned it, but about one, what you were escaping then, and then like just how you came to that realization that it wasn't the heroin you were, and it wasn't the Vicodin you were taking, and it was the escape. Yeah.
I mean, I think the way I describe it is, you know, from an really young age, I always felt that there was always some better place than wherever I was, some better me than whoever I was. And, you know, the escape, you know, what books did for me when I was younger was help me escape what was a chaotic and violent and confusing home life. And I turned to books, you know, like my earliest childhood memory is like kind of hiding in my closet, just like reading and just getting out of the world around me, which made no sense to me. You know, I wish I had, like, the first time I took a prescribed pain medication, right, and felt like, oh, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I was like, oh, this is escape. It took a long time to realize, you know, like a long time, like when I wrote it, I realized I was like, oh. But I think I was always escaping myself and my, really what it gave me was this way to pretend, which is escaping, that I was happy when I wasn't, that I liked the relationship I was in when I didn't, that I was okay saying yes when I meant no, that I was happily living the role that I had created for myself, that I thought I should be happily living, which is similar to your book and we talked about. Yeah. And so I think it just helped me escape me, which is hard to explain, but.
Yeah. And you had, did you have 3 babies under 4? Is that right?
I had my first 3 sons, my first litter of children. I had my first 3 boys in 4.5 years.
Yes.
Like straight from grad. I got my MFA. I was pregnant my whole second year getting my MFA. And my oldest son was born 2 weeks before my thesis was due. So I just remember like typing my book of short stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had 3 boys. When I was pregnant with my 3rd, my mom called me. She's like, you do know how this is happening, don't you? I was like, it's too late to have the talk now, but yeah, I do.
I had 2 boys back to back, 98 and 99. And I really find this, I wrote this down because I find that people who don't have experience with addiction have a hard time understanding the next part, because you and I were both prescribed pills, right? And what we found was that they didn't just help with the physical issue, but they helped with emotional pain as well. We were both high functioning. You had a very busy life, obviously with 3 kids, but you were also like living on this cul-de-sac. You lived in this, well-to-do neighborhood. You were respected, right? People, you were kind of like the organizer. People looked up to you. You were a super mom.
Team mom.
Team mom. So that's called high functioning, right?
Yeah.
That's when you're taking drugs and you can still do all that. That's called high functioning. So I wanted to just ask you how that solution, right? So like getting that first Percocet, which felt like a solution. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that and then talk about the progression where it becomes a problem.
Yeah. I mean, the first time, again, we're talking now mid-90s, and the opiate crisis wasn't a crisis. And Vicodin in particular was handed out in sample packs, like the dentist. I remember there being a bowl with with the tinfoil like bubble where you pop a pill out. It's like, oh, try this. This is new, because the drug reps were, really pushing it. And so I had it prescribed to me, and in childbirth, they give it to you after. And I remember the first time I took one as needed for emotional pain. It was just a prescription in the house. And my first marriage. I had these 3 little kids. My husband had been cheating on me. And I so wanted this happily ever after perfect family. And it was actually the 3rd time he cheated on me. I knew, like, oh, this is not going to be that. And I think I was really depressed, but didn't have a language for that, and certainly would have never told anyone that. And so I took one, and it helped me feel happy. I mean, basically, and that everything was going to be okay. And it helped me like, oh, it's fine. Right. Like that. And it also made it more fun to like play armor guys and fold laundry, if I'm being honest.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. But, and for me, the way opiates work in my brain, it wasn't like you might see like in a movie or in a stereotype where you're like to me, I was like, oh, I'm funnier. I'm smarter. I can like talk to you better. I can look in your eyes better. Like it gave me this sort of courage to be more connected in the world, which is really what I wanted. I wanted connection with people, and it was very like much internally isolated, even as I'm like organizing the potlucks and the things, right?
Yeah.
And it's just this feeling I had my whole life that everybody else has life figured out, right? Like the way I describe it is, when you're like driving down a residential street, like just go a few blocks over, and it's like dusk and all the lights are on in the houses. That's how I felt my whole life, like peering into those windows, and like everybody, all those people somehow like got a manual. They're happy. They can figure things out. Look, they have this, everybody else is normal. That's what I thought. My whole, like since I was a kid, like everyone else's family's normal, which we all know nobody's normal now, but it helped me. It just made me feel better about all of those things in my situation. And then it took 2 to feel that same way. And then it took 3. And then, one day I took like 4 in the whole day. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. I grew up in a family with a lot of alcoholism and addiction. I had a brother and sister who both died from a drunk driving accident, and another one from a heroin overdose. So I was never going to do that. Like I was going to go to school. I'm too smart for that. I'm not like my family. And so I remember saying, oh, this is a problem. I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. And so I put them away. And then when things got tough again, they came out. And eventually at the end of that phase, that 2 or 3 a day, I was taking 60 a day.
Yeah.
60. 20 at a time, which is like how tolerance works.
Yes.
And it wasn't like, you wouldn't know it either. Like you like people did not know, and then like a lot of people who become addicted to prescription, I turned to smoking heroin because it was certainly a lot easier, and cheaper and less, more efficient. I don't know.
No, it is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
And that's a common thing, how that, like, that's how tolerance works. And like, I knew that's not what I wanted to do or who I was, but I could not, like, when you're in that, it's so hard to describe to people who haven't been in that.
Yes.
There's 48 million people in this country who are in that, and there's a lot of people who love them. And it is like this compulsion and this way in which it feels like your very survival depends on it. You will die if you don't. And I think it's really hard to reconcile, like, but you knew right from wrong, and you were a mom, and you loved your children, and still this is happening.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
There's nothing you can do about it. And thank you for describing that, because I often have a hard time. I don't have a hard time articulating it, but I have a hard time getting people to see how it's possible. And this is another reason why your book is so great, because you absolutely don't look in the book like someone who would be taking 60 a day behind the scenes. So in order to support that habit, you end up basically stealing like credit cards and stuff from your neighbors, using those credit cards. Staycation is the second chapter, and that opens with you checking into a hotel with a stolen credit card. But you end up getting charged with a few felonies, a few less than our former president, but a few felonies.
And somehow Charles Manson only has 7.
What?
Yeah, and I've never done anything violent in my life, so like the whole system's a little wacky. But
and so you are looking at a much longer length of time of serving time, and you end up doing a lot less than that, which is really fortunate. But you go to jail, and I think I have this right. Well, you were a reader writer until opiates came along. Then you were no longer a writer. Is that correct? So tell us.
And I had to support myself.
And you had to support yourself. Yeah. But tell us about, you don't have to tell us about getting into jail, because if you haven't read that, I want you to read that in the book. But tell us about the skills that people have in jail, and how your skill came into play while you were there.
So, and just to say, like, writing was always how I made sense of the world, right? And so when I was doing those opiates, I don't write. Those two things can't exist at the same time for me. I write a lot now. Yeah. So, but everybody, in jail has, so first of all, the women I was in jail with, like, we're all going through the same thing together. 80% of women in jail are mothers, often of minor children. And everybody has, I think everybody has a gift, right? Whether it's a creative gift or a talent or skill. And so in jail, nothing's for free. Like there's, someone's, people are building furniture, like IKEA level furniture. They write in the book out of like Tampax boxes and toothpaste and like modular shelving. And there's amazing artists and really, savvy negotiators and business women and
chefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I started writing again in jail. And first it was like writing like a really bad YA book that I was trying to like connect with my son, who was 13, Ty, who was a writer, where I was like, I can send you chapters, you can type them. And I started ghostwriting in jail. I started talking to women, listening to their stories, and then writing letters to the judge as them, which was probably a crime, but it was for good. It was a crime for good. But so they could get sent to like treatment instead of prison, or get a pass for graduation or a funeral. And then I broke up with people for them. And
I didn't know that part.
Yeah, I seduced some people for them, which I didn't know I had in me, but it was a skill, But I started it felt good. Like, one, just to be writing again, and two, to be of value again at a time and a place when I didn't feel like I had any value to the world, certainly not to myself. Yeah. My community was mad at me. I was, a number in a locked facility.
Yeah. Wow. And
I'm really good at being other people. So the ghostwriting turned into a transferable skill later.
I want to bookend a story. Because I want to talk about the Zoom you had in January and how transformative that was. But prior to that, so now you've served your time, you're out of prison, you're kind of making your way back into your family. You've made your way back into your family, and you end up co-writing or ghostwriting books,
Mhm.
right? This is an amazing story how she ends up
I went to work as
doing
a
this.
literary agent,
Yes.
as a personal assistant.
Yeah. And then your past is revealed and they promote you.
I left 12 years later as CEO.
Yeah. So, but you have this really consequential lunch with Oprah.
Yeah.
So can you just talk a little bit about what that project was and what that meant and like how the lunch went?
Yeah. So so for 10 years at this literary agency, I was ghostwriting books. Like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I wrote a book with him, and working with all these, and Brian Stevenson and the Dalai Lama and John Gottman and all of these people, and keeping a secret my past, like desperately.
No one knew.
No one knew. I was so afraid someone would Google me and find out that I was in jail. And these were not judgy people, so I didn't need to be afraid, but I had just had so much shame. And I was trying to just create my resume of goodness by being so good adjacent, right?
Yes.
For when the truth came out, I could be like, yes, I'm this. And then also, look, I've done some good, And so I worked on a book with Anthony Ray Hinton. Brian Stevenson, we had done the book Just Mercy, which is an amazing book if you haven't read it. And he said, can you meet with Anthony Ray Hinton in Alabama? He just got off death row in 2015 and as an innocent man. And so we met, and Brian Stevenson was the first person we told my past, because it was like, oh, great. You're a perfect person to help him write this book. But to
look at you, he wouldn't know that, right?
Right.
Right. He'd be like, why is she the perfect person?
Yeah, no, I was probably the last person he thought would be the perfect person. But we had a lot in common and really became just a really great friend. But so his book got chosen by Oprah in 2018, and he called me whispering, because you're not allowed to tell anyone, there's a very serious NDA this big, that she had picked the book. And so I got to go with him, and I watched Oprah. As many people do. And I've had many conversations with Oprah in my head for decades. I've made her cry on her couch when she had a show. A lot of women my age have done that. And so I got to go to New York with him, and he was on CBS, and I'm they have this clear glass sort of green room. So you're right there, and Ray's best friend is next to me, and Oprah's waving, and I'm like, oh, and I was like, oh, I think he's waving to her. And I was like, but afterwards we all got invited to go to lunch, which was a very big deal. And she's sitting next, she's sitting here, and, there's 6 of us, and she's talking to everyone about the book. And, obviously it's a huge spotlight when Oprah picks a book, and she's telling me during lunch, as everyone's talking about all the things at the table, she starts telling me about power and what real power is. And saying, people didn't want me to do this book because I had done another book that was, someone was incarcerated, but it's my name on the door. And, so she's giving me these lessons on power. And she didn't know my story then. She knew, that my name was, a little font on the cover too. And she said nice things about the writing. And it was just like, this is the ultimate for me.
Yeah. I mean, I love that scene. And I feel the nerves and the excitement for you. And I love that whole part of the book, actually.
Yeah.
Because even though you're keeping the secret, you're still coming into yourself, like your authentic self, and you're starting to
Actually,
live.
if you look on my Instagram at pictures from that day, I'm smiling so big that it looks like my head is going to explode.
I have to look for those. So now I want to jump to you writing this book. So you said we talked about this last time. You said you rented a house in Thailand where you wrote a draft of the memoir in 7 weeks. And I know that you like to go to the tropics.
I do.
You want warm water to swim in. It's like your treat, right?
I have to create a punishment system for myself, because sometimes we are just ourselves.
Right.
No, but it's a way for me to create a little deadline. I can't go swimming in warm water, or go enjoy the sun, or see somewhere until I finish my writing for that day.
Yes.
So I have to keep little deadlines.
And then you wrote, as I was writing the darkest chapters, thunder was shaking the villa, and you appreciated the symbolism. So I wanted to just ask you again, which of those chapters, the darkest chapters, which were the hardest to write, and which were the most fun?
Mm-hmm. So with the nonfiction, your book is sold from a proposal, and then you have this year to write it. So That's why I would. And I knew I wanted to be really honest, and I knew I had to go away from my family and my work to do that. And I knew I had advanced. I've never been to Thailand also. So the darkest chapters was a particular chapter that I had never told anyone about. I had not put it in my book proposal. My editor didn't know, my agent didn't know, my kids didn't know. And that was really the time when I was out on bail. Originally, the chapter was called Nordstrom's Return Policy, which was the darkest chapter, which I loved. I think it got cut, that title, but
That's a good title.
But it was really, it was really hard to just say, like, here's me at my worst. I mean, you feel vulnerable. I felt vulnerable, but I knew I had to, like, give the full picture. And when we pretty up addiction, it doesn't help anyone.
No.
Right?
No, it doesn't.
And if it was like, oh, I did, I did this and then everything was great and I got to here, but that's not how it works. So, so that was the darkest chapter, and I had to let my kids read it. And I know it's delusional to think you're controlling the weather, but I think I was controlling the weather because it was so dark and painful. And it was good. I was in a different time zone to just, like, really honest, because I hadn't told anyone the stories from in jail, like, not even what it was like. But yeah, when I was writing that, me at my very worst, like, there was like a monsoon, like that. I have video. The house is shaking, and I was like, I'm doing this.
Power.
What?
Power.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was like the hardest thing to do, and writing that staycation chapter, which is me actually, like, in committing my crimes, which that was like the last chapter I wrote at the request of my editor 3 days before it went into production.
Ooh.
He's like, we need to see you committing crimes. And I was really, like, invested in the fact that I had been so honest in this book.
Yes.
At that point. And then when he said that, I was like, oh, I really don't want to do that, because I didn't want to be that honest. Like, what are you going to think of me? What are you going to think of me? Right.
Yeah.
So he, I did it, and it was the right thing to do. But, honesty, it's a process.
It's a really good chapter.
Yeah.
It's a really good chapter.
But the happy things were
happy.
Sorry, the happy things, which is probably what only question you asked me that I'm just now answering. But the happiest things were kind of, I think, at the end, where it wasn't like Oprah and, like, it was just kind of this thing I wrote at the end where I forgave myself, where I showed myself the same compassion I would show anyone, a stranger, a family member, someone I loved. Like, you're human, you make mistakes, you did the best you could do. Like, that kind of language, and just saying, like, yeah, I've been really stupid and I've been really smart and I've done ugly things and beautiful things. Like, just kind of, like, giving myself permission to be fully human.
Yeah.
That was, like, happy.
I love that. You mentioned it's your book birthday today. Your paperback was supposed to be out now.
Yes.
But I want to now take us to January of this year. And you were ramping up for the meeting with your publisher for the paperback, right? And so tell us about that month and that meeting.
Do you want to hear about the month? No.
Well,
No.
I mean,
yeah. So Jan, my book had been out 6 months at the end of the year, and it like was received really well and did well, and I got a real book tour from Simon Schuster, which is rare, and I was having a moment in December where I was like, am I just better at being other people in books than me? Like, I was having a couple of wallow days, like in the weird week between Christmas and New Year's when we wallow sometimes, or I do every year. But I was having this moment, and I was like, oh, did I let my publisher down? Did I, like, it's not a New York Times bestseller, but I've had all these as other people. And so I wallowed for a couple of days, and then I was like, I need to manifest Oprah. Now, Oprah rarely picks a book not on publication day, and I'm 6 months past, and I was like, I need to do the thing I've done before in my life where I just imagine impossible things. My manifesting is not a vision board. I'm not good at arts and crafts. It's just daydreaming, right? I just daydream, and I'm really good at, like, specific conversations. And so I did that, and then I was like, okay, back to business in January for my day job as a literary agent. And January 1st, my dad passed away. So I was like, okay, 2024. And then 10 days later, if you've read the book, sorry, my husband told me he manifested his dream woman, was not me. and he was out of the house. And then a week later, my publisher's like, get on this Zoom to talk about your paperback. And I'm on the Zoom, and they're like, well, we're thinking of reaching out to book clubs again. And I'm a literary agent. So I was like, well, which ones have you? And they said, no, that you're not telling me, And they're like, which one do you want? And I was like, well, it. We're just doing this thing. And then all of a sudden Oprah pops in the Zoom and said, which one do you want, Lara? And I was like, oh, 2024 is really roller coastering.
Yeah.
And she said, this is a full circle moment. And then she was like, I'm just a vessel for you. And I was like, what? But she mysteriously found my book. And there's a whole process that your book, like authors can't send books to Oprah. It has to go through publicists and her book. She goes, I found your book in December in my personal residence in my living room in Hawaii, and nobody knows how it got there. I've asked every single staff member. Nobody put it there. No one knows how it got there. Didn't go through any of the channels. It almost sounded like I'd broken into her house. So I felt like I was a little triggered and felt guilty. I was like, it wasn't me. And she said, I just picked it up and started reading. And then I was like, oh, I've met her. Like, it was just this full circle moment.
So you hadn't kept in touch from
we're not texting.
Right? No. But you had that meeting at the lunch.
Had that
meeting,
and
then the next encounter
in 2018 was
it
was this.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really amazing. And now the paperback doesn't come out till February. But I did write a bonus chapter for it, sort of updating, because a lot of the story arcs, life keeps on lifing in a memoir, right? And sometimes you happily ever after things to end a book, and then again, life happens.
Yeah. And this is the first time I've heard of that, of bonus chapters being added for the paperback, which I think is amazing. And absolutely, I will be buying it to read those chapters. You turned them in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last week.
Right. Yes. I'm trying to be mindful of time. So just really quickly, because I love this story. When you and I first really connected, you were heading to Chowchilla. Can you just tell us about that experience?
Yeah.
This was in May? April?
Yeah.
Somewhere,
like that. Yeah,
spring.
something like that. Yeah. In May, I think. So before the book launched, about a month before, I launched a nonprofit because I knew I'd have a microphone for a little while to provide gender and trauma responsive services to incarcerated women, and then reentry services after. So no one's going back to jail because you don't have transportation or childcare or have to be in 3 places at once, because it's really, really hard to rebuild a life.
All of which happened to you.
Yeah, all of which happened to me. And I had a master's degree, and the privilege that comes along with support and people, all the things. So when Oprah picked the book, she said, so we had been planning we'd launched our nonprofit. I had been planning to do a book club in Chowchilla, which is the largest women's prison in the country. It's in Chowchilla, CCWF in California. And when Oprah picked the book, she said, I've been secretly for 2 years doing book club in Chowchilla. And she hadn't publicized it. There's no photos, no publicity. And I think she announced it when they announced the book, I think, so people knew this is an issue she's cared about for a long time. And so we went in to Chowchilla together and did book club with, she told all of them before it was announced that this was the next book. But we went in and did book club the whole day in Chowchilla with 150 women. I'm going back August 23rd to do it with the other 2,000. But I'd already been working this through our nonprofits. First time they've allowed a hardback book in there. So we went, the warden is having me sign, and they've required all the correctional officers to read it. And I negotiated time off. It's going on live stream, so let's hope this happens because of everyone's sentence for participating. And it was really sorry about this one, but really the most amazing and meaningful book event, because everyone just wanted to talk about hope and how do you imagine a different future when you're in a place where it doesn't seem possible. And so, so that was amazing.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And I love, yes, absolutely. It's actually a really good note to end on.
Yeah.
But can you just tell the part where you're walking in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, unlike if you have your own local book club, it's not like you're emailing and texting and updating people on snacks and who's going to be there. So Oprah had announced, it a couple of months before that this was the book, and Simon Schuster donated like 800,000 books in there, which is amazing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so we're getting there, and it's, one, I was like, are they going to clear me? Which they did, but
Yeah.
yeah. But so she walks in, and, it's this huge, auditorium space with 150 women, and a lot of the people who are there visiting and the people who work there, and they're all cheering and yelling when she walks in. She has a microphone, and I'm kind of at the back, and I don't know how it's going to be received, right? So like, there's all kinds of ways it could be received. Mm-hmm. And then she says in the microphone, "Mama Love is here." And I walk up, and like the women are all holding the book. They start crying and clapping, and like, and it was because they felt like, how you recognize yourself? They felt like recognized and seen in a way. And I certainly did too. And it was really like such close reading and like very specific paragraphs. And can you sign this page? And so it was really, I started crying, and it was just really such a full circle moment. And the thing is, if I'd gotten the original sentence that they were talking about, I would have been in Chowchilla. And because I'm actually a rule follower and like I will behave, I would have been in that book club. I know I would have been in that curated group, and that's how I would have been. So it was like this moment, when you have like, it's like a sliding door moment.
Very much, yeah.
Like this, like alternate world. I would have been there listening to doing Oprah's book club and taking notes in the front row, right?
Yeah.
And seeing Oprah that way. And it was just like really, it was really powerful. And it made me feel a huge responsibility. Mostly.
It is a huge responsibility. Yeah. And I love the idea of the sliding doors movement. Movement. Yeah. Is there a movement?
There is now. Yeah.
And no hardcover books in prison because they can be, used as weapons.
Mollywomping is what we would say.
Mollywomping. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to take up any more time because I know you all probably have questions as well. But first, just thank you for being so candid and honest and lovely and generous.
Thank you.
And does anybody have questions?
Where did you go in Thailand?
Oh, this is a really important question.
Yeah.
I went to Costa.
Not important, but
no, it was important.
I'm fine listening to you talk.
I went to Koh Samui.
Because I live in Thailand.
Yeah, I went to Koh Samui. I went to an island because I love islands, and it's one of those things where I was like, where have I always wanted to go? And when I was in jail, like there was even someone had a postcard of Hawaii up. The guards tore it up because it was blocking the window and you were allowed to. But I remember being there and thinking, I will never go anywhere like that again. Like I really believed my life was over. Like I imploded it. Like there's no redemption arc. I didn't deserve one. And I've always loved the warm tropical places. And so I was like, where do I want to go? Now, recently I've been like, where else have I always wanted to go? I've never been to the Greek islands. And I saw this movie when I was like 13 and I was like, I need to go to the Greek islands at some point. But it was, Koh Samui. It was like, I was by myself. It was amazing.
Thank you for sharing your whole life.
Yeah. Thank you.
First of all, fantastic story. Knowing nothing about it is great. I'm very curious. I have something for the question, but in today's society, we know that a lot of people do not share. They withhold a lot of information about themselves. Therefore, a lot of distance is usually between you and a friend. I'm curious as to, because you've shared so much about yourself and your story, how has that impacted your relationships, friendships, and also the family?
And what was the last part?
And also the family.
Yeah. So I did let all 4 of my boys read the book before it was too late to change anything. And my oldest son, just to answer that part first, he said, Mom, I've always felt close to you, and now I feel even closer. Because I didn't have access to my mom's interior world, and I'm was very honest. Like there's things that no one wants to read about their mom doing, or even just that little bit you read, like I had sex and then more sex.
Right.
They're like, you
Yeah.
know. But here's the thing, my whole life, what I wanted was connection. I wanted friends. I felt so isolated. And that's why I was pretending and playing the roles and not being real for most of my life, because I thought that was the way to do it. What I've found, and Brene Brown found this way before me, but what I found, what I had to experience myself is like, the more honest and real I am, and just like, here is my full messy self, it does the opposite of what I feared. People do not run away. They come closer. And the people who have come closer are real and authentic. And like in January, that time I described, I've been through death before in my family. I've been through divorce and betrayal before in my family. I'd even been through Oprah before, but not different. And sometimes the good things can be harder to get through. And there was a moment where towards the end of January, I was like, why am I so okay? Like, what is different? And what I realized was every hard thing in my life, I went through alone by my choice, right? Because I think sometimes we're only as alone as we choose to be. And so I realized like I have these friends and these people who know all the things, and they never let me be alone. But even more than that, I knew how to ask for help. When my dad died, I called my friend. I was like, I don't know what to do. I was like, I just landed I was in baggage claim in Key West, Florida. I didn't by myself. Never been to Key West. And she's like, okay, you're going to sleep, you're going to eat, you're going to call, and so that ability to ask for help that I never had, like now I have a feeling. Give me your numbers. I'll call all of you and tell you all my feelings. Like it's a little, it's a pendulum, right? So I'm like, what is this feeling I have? But I always internalized hard things, and I always went through them alone, and it's so much easier. And so really like getting so honest with even the like darkest, worst side of me has done the opposite of what I always feared. And a lot of people in this country, a lot of women especially, have DM'd me all their secrets, because everybody has something they're ashamed of. Everyone wants to feel that lightness of unburdening things and just being real. And it's just, I have real conversations. I was never good at like small talk, but I have no patience for it now.
Yes.
But thank you.
Maybe you mentioned, go ahead.
I was going to ask a craft question. Your book is so meticulously done. It's so seamless. Did you go in knowing what the structure was going to be? I know in proposals you have to give a chapter outline, and it's all very meticulously done. But were there any parts of the book, structurally or craft-wise, that surprised you in the making of it that you then adapted and changed from your original vision?
So the proposal I did was pretty extensive. It wasn't like in this chapter or whatever. It was like a slice of chapter. So part of that was for me to, have a head start with each blank page chapter, right? I was like, oh, I'm already 4 pages in.
Yeah.
Right. There's something in that. But I, what I did first was just like, what are the pivotal scenes? Because the memoir is not an autobiography. It's not like I was born on Tuesday, January 28th, and then this happened. It was like, what are the scenes? One, I'm going to remember the pivotal scenes because they were pivotal. What are the scenes that fit the themes and threads that are in my book, like the worst and the best of them. So I knew there were some things that I didn't know, like that dark chapter. I had never planned to write about that, but in it on the page. And then I had some false starts. I wrote some, like the first 3 chapters, the first time before I went to Thailand, I wrote, and I was like, is this it? Is this what it's going to be? And it was not good. I mean, they're funny, but originally my book, like I was 13 years old. It was past tense. But I specifically designed it because I know most people don't read. And I know when people read, they read fiction. And when they read memoir, they read celebrity memoir. So knowing all of that, I wanted to write a book. My measure of a book, like I'm not pretentious. I don't care what book it is, fiction, romance, whatever genre. I don't want to be able to put it down. Like that's my personal measure of a book. And so that was my goal. So I did first person present tense, which can be like exhausting, but also given that we have so much bias and judgment about moms and women in jail and addiction. You know, this is a way where you're making my choices with me in my head. And so it's kind of you. This is kind of on you. You did
Right.
this, right? But that's how you hack empathy. That's why I love memoir, because that is really how you hack empathy in people, you know? So, but yeah, I didn't have it all plotted out. Some of it you just know on the page and in the process. And then my editor cut out a lot of like my jokes and all my dreams. He's like, no one wants to hear about your dreams. I was like, but they're so meaningful. Cut them all out.
They had to go. That was actually, Rima, what the question I was going to follow up with. So that was perfect. And because the proposal had the chapters in it, so you really did kind of have an outline.
Yeah.
But you didn't use a traditional outline when you wrote, right?
Right.
Yeah. 7 weeks.
It was like a weird deadline. I just put it on myself when I'm a procrastinator. So like, you know, and this is my 14th book, but my first book is me. But like the other ones turned out great, but it wasn't a graceful process. I'd be like, oh, I have to do this is due in 2 months. You know, I didn't want to do that. But sometimes like giving yourself deadlines, like as a writer, it helps you like hack that inner critic censor thing. There's actually a really famous ghostwriter in this room. I won't point her out yet, who could probably answer how to do this better, but she's got a hat on. And she's got a novel out. So I would do like 3 pages in an hour, right? Like this, I have to do this. Like I can do 3 pages in an hour, especially if there's dialogue, then that's like really cheating. But I have to do these little mini deadlines for myself just to sort of like get me out of my own head and just on the page. Doesn't mean it doesn't have to be edited and it's going to be great. But I do those kind of deadlines for myself. What was your question? I didn't know if I'm answering your question.
No, that was it.
Yeah.
I said 7 weeks, huh?
Oh yeah.
Meaning,
so I created
yeah.
this. Yeah, that's what. So I was like, oh, I'm going to get a first draft in 7 weeks. And the book wasn't due till June. So I was like, you know, this is in the winter. So I was like, I'm so ahead of myself. But it was such a crazy deadline that like on my connecting flight home in Doha, I wrote the last chapter. Because I was like, I have to do this. Because I also know when I get back to real life and I'm on the same time zone as my children and my work colleagues and all of that, I was going to not prioritize it. Right. So that was really what it was.
You have a literary agent. Is that weird, being a literary agent?
It's like a therapist having a therapist.
Yeah.
You got to have one. Because I can't call and be like, let me pitch you this greatest book ever. Yeah. You know, like you have to hype it. Like it's way easier to hype other people.
That's funny. It is like, or an attorney having an attorney.
Yeah, or a doctor not doing surgery on himself.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, there we are. I didn't see that before.
Oh, how do I? Forgot we were live streaming.
I did. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you were getting your MFA and writing short stories, and you've hinted before that you started off in fiction. If you were to write a novel next, do you have an idea if you're willing to share?
I have 3 ideas.
Are you willing to share any specifics?
Fiction writing that's what I did as a kid. That's what I did in college and in graduate school. It's kind of what I think I'm good at. I ended up writing all these nonfiction books. But my next book I did the bonus chapter, and that's it. But I think, my next book is a novel, and thematically, I want to do like a beach read. I want to do like something that you can't put down that is not so heavy, but it's also about the secrets that women keep, right? And so thematically, it's on there, just inspired by fictionalized.
Yeah.
I listened to the audio book. I was wondering if the process of recording it and then reading out loud, kind of like all these secrets and these chapters, if that was any different of a process than writing it.
That's a good question. I actually recorded the audiobook at a studio in Santa Monica. And they're like, we scheduled 5 days. And I was like, let's just do it quicker. I have, you
Yeah.
know, so I get there and, you know, they have a producer and it's a very serious operation. And they have the Simon Schuster in New York
Yes,
live.
yes,
And then, you know, it's
yes.
all this and it's a sound booth. And I was like, I really don't think we need 5 days. Now, I don't listen to audiobooks because I'm someone, I have to see words. It doesn't matter if it's ebook, whatever, I have to see it to retain it. So right before I did mine, I was like, I better listen to an audiobook. And so I listened to Jeanette McCurdy's book.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, she's an actress. Let me hear how
Mhm.
she does it. And I'm a horrible actor. So I was like, oh, I can do it kind of monotone. But I went in there and they're like, you know, this can be a really intense process and, you know, emotional. I was like, no, I'll be fine. And then I opened up, they have the iPad going, right? You're in the thing. And I open it up to the dedication.
Ah.
And it's like, for my boys, Dylan, Cody, Ty, and Caden, my forever loves for these many lives. I got halfway through that I started sobbing and I was like, oh, we're going to need all 5 days. It was really intense to read it out loud. But then the part of me that's an editor, because you can't change anything. I was like, oh, I was kind of like, oh, I know I want to change that word and I want to edit and oh, is this, you know, I had like a vulnerability crisis in that, hearing it out loud. Cause it'd been a while. And I was like, oh, I'm, you know, like I was getting a little harsh in my head. I was like, oh, am I just being cringy and pathetic? And oh, I'm so emo. Like, you know, I was just doing all that stuff in there because it was so much my internal world and just read it. So it was harder than I thought. But I was also, I'm notoriously tone deaf, as I was telling Laura. So I was also like, but wait, and I'm also delusional. So I was like, this is my only chance to win a Grammy. Like, yes. So both things were happening. So like that was also going through my head. Like, because you can win a Grammy for audiobooks. It's like, this is only shot there. If that's it. It's not particularly on my bucket list of things. I like to have big goals, but I was like, well, I got a shot now.
I love that. It's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, first of all, your book is absolutely fascinating, should be required reading.
Thank you.
But about prison reform, really, I mean, you showed how broken the system is.
Yeah.
Is there hope that it could change?
I mean, if there's hope, then it could change, right? So I think it's like with any, you know, it's with any system. It just feels overwhelming that it's so broken, but yet you still have to hope and then do things, right? So I think the first job is just getting people to care about incarcerated women. I mean, I certainly never spent any time in my cul-de-sac thinking about that, right? And I think it's the fastest growing population, incarcerated population, 750% increase in the last 3 decades. And here's the other thing, 100% of women, close to 100%. My co-founders got the actual statistics in our nonprofit website, but I embellish because I'm a storyteller, but close to 100% have a history of trauma, right? Domestic violence, sexual abuse, childhood abuse. It's a very traumatized population in a system that was built and designed for men, that is mostly run by men, that is re-traumatizing and triggering women every single day. And here's like the crazy statistic. If you're an incarcerated woman, you are 30 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than not incarcerated, than walking down the streets of New York City or anywhere at night, 30 times. When you're in a place where you're not going to be believed, where you can't run, you're there for your safety, right? Like the safety of the community, you're not safe there. And so I think there's a lot of work to do. And the first is getting people to care. But if you care about the foster care system, you have to care about incarcerated women. And jails for women are, you know, that's the front door. It's the front door to all mass incarceration, but that's, you know, in California, you can be sentenced to up to 3 years, at least in Santa Cruz County, 3 years in jail. Jails were meant as holding places. They don't have the programming, the services, the rehabilitation, in-person visits. You know, it's so much harder, especially for women, you know, and you have counties where one side of the county is saying you have a year to do all these requirements to get your child back. And the other side of the county is saying you have 18 months in jail. like those things, you can't care about all those things. And, I will tell you, my son, Caden, who is 4 when I was arrested, who, a lot of the book is about me desperately trying to get him back because CPS took him on the day of my arrest. My other boys were at school. They weren't part of that. But, like my proudest moment of the last, it was 15 years ago this month that I got out of jail. And I still have dreams that I have to go back, just to tell you how traumatizing. Like I told the funny, nice things, but do not recommend to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And I still have dreams where like, oh my God, I have to go back and it's a mistake. And what, people are getting pulled from me and I'm getting like, locked away. But my proudest moment of the last 15 years is not like New York Times bestsellers and Dalai Lama did my, and Oprah. It was driving my son, Caden, who was 4, to start his first year at UC San Diego. He just finished his first year. And it was moving him into the dorm and having a moment saying, realizing that statistically, even with just a year, he was more likely to go to prison than to go to UCSD with a 4.0. And so it was this moment where I was like, again, the sliding door moment, like, wow, this could have turned out so differently for both of us. And with that thing is also responsibility, right? Because like I'm free, I'm out here living my best life, but there's a lot of people who aren't. And I'm not saying like people should not pay for their crimes. Like I stole from my neighbors. I use your credit card at the grocery store. I did those things and I knew right from wrong, but the way in which we want people to pay forever, that's what I'm fighting against. The way in which we stigmatize and shame, that's what I want to fight against. And the way in which we want generations to pay and expect them, and sometimes like we believe in rehabilitation conceptually, but like if you have a rental house, are you going to rent to someone who's been incarcerated? Are you going to hire them? Like I can give you 10 reasons why a formerly incarcerated woman is going to be your best employee, right? Because people who have lost everything or are trying to prove their value will always rise to the level that we believe in them. I truly believe that. And there's people like, oh, you shouldn't make any money off your book, so I shouldn't be able to put my son in college. I shouldn't be able to like have safe housing. When those women leave Chowchilla, they're put on a bus when they leave prison. They're given a clear plastic bag. And their bus, whatever county they're getting paroled in. So it's Los Angeles. So when they get off the bus, it's wherever the bus station is in downtown Los Angeles, there is a line of predators looking for that clear plastic bag. And that's happening every single day. Because, and it's just like, here's people who are trying to work. They're trying to get their children back. They're desperate. It's so hard to rent, right? And if you can't rent, you're in the underground rental market, you have no rights. And if you're in shame, you're not going to advocate for yourself. And if you're a felon, you'll never be believed, no matter what. No matter what, forever. I mean, unless you're running for office. No, sorry, this is not true. Sorry. I was like, now it's cool. Like now it's okay. But here's the thing. Like I am sorry. I am selling my house right now. Right. Great. I have a house. I was able to buy a house and it's selling because I'm getting divorced, but I'm selling it. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to rent. I am so terrified of those housing like to go through a property management company. And this is 15 years later because I still have a criminal record. This is, 6 New York Times bestsellers later. This is Oprah good later. And it's still like triggering and terrifying. And it brings up something like, I have to go to Craigslist to find somewhere to live, like it, but it is like that never goes away unless like people care and we change it. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah. The clear plastic bag.
What?
The clear
plastic bag.
Wow.
It's just the sign. So like you're ready to be victimized, trafficked, all the things.
Wow. We are right there at time. I think we could take one more quick question if you have one, and then Mama Love is going to sign your books.
And so is Laura, and her book is amazing. We're here. Now we're going to do her book talk. No. So Laura, sorry, Zibby. Yeah. We got an hour. Does anyone have to go anywhere? No.
Because we're live streaming, can you tell people how to support your nonprofit?
Thank you.
That's-
You
yes.
can go to the website, thegemmaproject.org.
Mhm.
GHEGEMMA project.org.
And it's in the back of your
It's in the back of the book.
Yeah.
You know what I love? Like I put it in the back of the book, just like if you care about this issue, here's the website, and there's all kinds of data and information, and we're creating a model that can be replicated across the country. And we're starting in Chowchilla Prison. We're starting in the jail systems up north. So there's a lot of good things happening there. But like I'll get a little alert on my email. Like I'll look in the morning, it'll be an alert. It'll be like, I just got one, and it was like, a donation has come into the Gemma Project, and it's like 3 a.m. South Dakota, $10. I'm like, someone just finished the book, and like, like that's the thing that matters. Like, yeah, we're getting grants, and
Mhm.
that
That $10
but like
donation.
it's just like this thing from Ohio, or like that. And there's book clubs. Part of getting people to care is to like having them see themselves like, this could be me if I had made these choices. And also it's just, there's so much shame and stigma. Like there's so much for 11 years of my life post jail that I wasn't present for, because I was so worried that you wouldn't find out. Like sitting next to someone on a plane, like, oh, what's your book about? It's like, oh shit, you're trapped next to me. Sorry. But so there's these book clubs across the country, and they're like dressing up in prison stripes, and what's their jail nickname going to be? And like commissary is their book club snacks, and people are like, well, that's so offensive. And I'm like, no, it's destigmatizing. Like it's destigmatizing, because the more like people are talking about it or even joking about it, it's just it's a reality.
Just having it discussed.
Yeah. I mean,
And
they were chopping up some powdered sugar, might have been borderline, but but go book clubs, go. Powdered sugar.
And you said like 80% of women that are incarcerated are moms, right?
Or mothers that are in jail, or mothers of minor children, often the sole caregivers. And the reasons women end up in jail are often interpersonal. It's very different. A lot of times it has to do with the men in their life. And so
one more.
I did a film about 20 years ago about a woman that was reconnecting moms and children by running a daycare. And what we found is that 80% of the women are much more harshly adjudicated than men. They serve much more time. They get paroled way less often. And
they get
have kids.
And they get held long, without bail, because, the number one predictor of a woman going back to jail is poverty. It's not, that is the thing, right? So never before a judge has a man stood there and he said, who is taking care of your children? How could you do this as a father? But women are they're held to a different standard and judged harshly. And judges, they don't say that to the men in the courtroom.
And that their revisitation is much higher than that.
Recidivation.
Recidivism, my co-defendant, who happened to be an ex-husband, which is when the romance ends, but we had the same exact charge. We had the same exact charges. He did not do everything. Like, I never got in trouble. I was good behavior. I followed all the rules. I did all the things. He was let off probation long before me even going back to jail. He had his record expunged automatically. I'm trying to get my record expunged just so I can rent a house and go to Canada. For some reason, I'm a danger to Canada, I guess. But
it's so random, by the way. That's really
I know
random.
it's random, but I'd like to go. Maybe I want to go to Australia.
Yeah.
But I had to write a letter. I had to get 10 letters of recommendation. Now I'm going to have to go to a hearing.
And he got his record cleared?
They did it automatically.
Yeah. It's shocking.
Same exact charges.
It's absolutely, when you read about it, it's absolutely shocking.
Well, my public, the attorneys handling this for me, they're like, write a letter that why in the interest of justice you should be, they should clear your record after 15 years of never doing anything wrong again. I go, how about in the interest of justice, they tell me why they shouldn't, because my male co-defendant, they're like, don't write that. I was like, no. But here's the thing is, you don't advocate for yourself when you're in shame. Like, I would never be upset. I'd just be like, yeah, yeah, that's fair. I did something wrong. And so I find as more time passes, I get a little heated about Canada and things that might not be equal for myself. Right.
I love that you said that though. We really have to stop.
I know we have to stop. I'm so sorry.
We could talk
You can give
forever.
us the keys. We'll lock up. It's cool. Okay.
But
Sorry.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Who knew I was such a talker?
End of live stream.